Hello everyone, and once again, yeah. So hello everyone, and welcome back to the Innovation Tech community once again. And this is the final episode of the Global A Summer Bootcamp. So along with me, David Patrick, so the Global MVP and the Q&A champion. So you can search it on the Q&A champion. So he's the one big sensation. And hi David.
Hi, how's it going?
It's good. So how about you?
Doing great, doing great.
Yeah, so we are so happy to have you in this session, and so we have to know, I mean, lots of insights from this session, especially about this create your own chat GPT with the Azure AI, and especially about the AI will plays a key role in the nowadays, and so that too, especially in the Microsoft AI. And so we would like to know lots of insights from you. So I would like to share your screen, and so let's get started, and you can elaborate yourself, and then you can go ahead, and then the stage is yours right now. So if you please, audience, if you have any queries, please reach out, please drop your queries regarding the session, and I would like to ask the questions in the middle of the session as well. Thank you guys, and stage is yours, debate.
Awesome, great. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. So, this is my talk, Building Your Own Chat GPT with Azure AI. My name is Dave Patrick. You can find me on Twitter or X, I guess it's called now, and LinkedIn and all the other social medias at David E. Patrick. I've got a bunch of certifications. I'm a certified trainer, certified solution developer, solutions expert, MVP. One of my They've got down here, I'm MCP dead. That's Microsoft Certified Professional Developer, Enterprise Application Developer. That's an old VB6 certification. I just think it's funny, so I keep it up there. Find out all about me at my LinkedIn. So check me out there at linkedin.com/DavidPatrick. Find out about my company at tinyurl.com/DSA career. And I also run a user group that is international, just like this conference. So feel free to check out more information about MAD SharePoint, which is Mid-Atlantic Developers SharePoint Users Group, but also because SharePoint sometimes makes us mad. So all the links about me are up there on that slide. Feel free to check out more information. All right, let's jump right into it. So this talk is kind of for everyone, right? So I want to start off with real basics. What is AI and why would you want to use AI? And this is coming from the Microsoft standpoint. I'm a big Microsoft guy, so I kind of use Microsoft's take on AI, what their definition and how people are using it, what benefits they're getting from it. And then we'll get into some demos. I've got one demo where we're using the AI cognitive service, the AI language, where we build a bot and create an email conversation so it understands how to work with email. Then we'll create one based on HR documents using RAG, where we ground our data or ground the AI in our own data. And then if we have time, I might even slip in a quick Copilot Studio bot where we actually build a bot in Teams. So we'll see how much time we have to get through all those. So let's start off by just, let's unmask the villain that is AI. And for any of you folks that used to watch Scooby-Doo, this is the old, at the end of every Scooby-Doo episode, we would unmask the villain, and it was always, Old Man Pepper. In this case, AI is really just a bunch of if-then-else statements, which is true and not true, right? AI definitely has its foundations in logic, but it's definitely a lot more than that. So what is AI? I like Microsoft's definition. This comes from their learnmicrosoft.com website, which I use a lot in this presentation, which I use a lot in my daily job. Um, Artificial intelligence is the capability of a computer to imitate intelligent human behavior. So you can do things like analyze images, recognize images, understand speech, and interact in sort of natural ways and make predictions about data. So artificial intelligence is any technique that enables computers to mimic human intelligence. Now, there's some subsets of that. Machine learning, which is a technique where machines get better at what they're doing. And where they use this by using the previous data from previous runs, kind of like we do. And then there's a subset of that, which is deep learning, where these machines get better at these tasks using neural networks. And that way, it can actually train itself. So that's where you're getting into that kind of real Terminator style type AI. So some of the important concepts to think about when you're talking about AI, because there's a lot of buzz around AI. Algorithms, right? Those are those sequence of calculations and rules used to solve a problem or analyze a set of data. The machine learning we just talked about, that technique where mathematical algorithms can create predictive models based on previous data. And then deep learning is that special kind of ML that can do this, learns how to get better by itself. So the era of AI is now. Microsoft's got a whole this website, Microsoft.com/AI, is all dedicated to how can AI help us? Can reduce the mundane tasks so we can just focus on what we do best. What are some of these tasks we can do? We can use it for security. There's the Microsoft Security Copilot. One of the questions I get sometimes is, what's Copilot? Well, there's many Copilots from Microsoft, right? There's the Microsoft Sales Copilot that focuses on helping us do sales, like in Dynamics CRM. There's the Security Copilot that helps us to analyze threats and respond to them. There's the 365 Copilot that focuses on our work with Word and Excel and helps us. It's like having an office expert. Hey, I don't know how to do a certain formula, and AI, a 365 Copilot will help me with that formula, or it'll create a PowerPoint for me. So it boosts our creativity and works more productively. I see a bunch of questions already popping in there. What are some of the key components? We're going to get into some of those key components. So that's coming up. And we're also going to talk about options and scaling and all that stuff. So, we'll put a pin in those questions. We'll wait till we get to those topics and see if we answer some of those questions. Especially, these are all great questions. How do we monitor? So that's all coming up shortly. Back to the general landscape of AI. GitHub Copilot. That's one that's real popular. Kind of one of the original ones that came out. That for like $10 a month, you could have that pair programmer where you're writing code and Copilot is looking at your code and making suggestions. If you could prompt it to write code for you and then modify that code. So lots of different Copilots that are available. There's one for Power BI that helps you analyze your data and write DAX equations for you. So lots and lots of AI out there available to help us in our everyday tasks. And it's everywhere. Companies have doubled their investments. They're focusing on transparency and fairness so that AI doesn't, the biases that are out there don't get included in AI, or we try to minimize that. At least half of organizations have invested in AI in at least one business area. And these are some of the examples of some of these organizations that have done this. You've got Ernst & Young that saved 250,000 hours of man work by automating processes. You got PepsiCo that did they increased or accelerated their time to market. So they used sales and demand forecasting to control their inventory, do better inventory management. Then there's Progressive Insurance that helps do better selling to their customers. So they use AI to look at what people are buying and say, hey, maybe you really should have something else. So there's some real ground boots on the ground work being done with AI in the business world. Microsoft is all in on AI. I don't know if anyone's been to any of the webinars. I know Microsoft Build's coming up later this month. They're going to announce a bunch of new initiatives and features and ways for us to be more engaged in AI. So it is part of their intelligent data platform. There's really two audiences that Microsoft is focusing their areas on. So you've got the business users and citizen developers, and that's the Copilots that we've already built, that Microsoft has already built. So that's your Power BI Copilot and your Copilot Studio to build what used to be called Power Virtual Agents, and Copilot that's built into Edge and built into Windows. So that's your citizen developers. That's the no code, low code folks that are using these Copilots. Then there's the developers, and basically what Microsoft said is, for those folks, we want to let them build their own Copilots. We want to let them build their own ChatGPT like bots. And that's what we're focusing on here. So we're going to use the services that Azure makes available to us, things like cognitive search and language, to build our own chatbots. And this Microsoft's platform makes it available. They allow it to be accessible, repeatable. It's already built with security, trusted, and responsible. It really helps us to make AI accessible to everyone at any skill level. And in fact, the demo we're going to do today, one of the demos we're going to do today, even though we're using Python code, you don't really need to know Python to get it up and running, and even to put your own data in there. So it really is truly for any skill levels. I still see a lot of great questions popping in there. And again, when we get to some of the demos, I think we'll answer some of those questions. So I'm not going to answer them at this moment. We'll see. We'll get through it all, and then we'll go back and see if there's any lingering questions. So Azure Cognitive Service, there's a lot of different services. The one I want to focus on is the one that's for language. And this is where I want to create a chatbot. That seems where everyone seems to be hot and heavy. Everyone's excited about the chatbots. And you can use this as a developer to create a language service that's deployed with your own schema, with your own data, and then do things like build a web app that calls the REST APIs and uses the client libraries to interact with that language service. That's what this is. Now, Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to rename this. They've called it Azure AI Language. I do think that's a better name. It rolls off your tongue a little bit easier. It is a little frustrating, though, because the Microsoft marketing strikes again. They love to just rename things. So just when I was getting used to it being called Azure Cognitive Services for Language, now they renamed it to Azure AI Language. So just be aware of that. Some of the documentation will still refer to the older name, but it has been renamed. And they've renamed a few things in this space. So I'll call them out whenever Microsoft likes to do that. If I want to get started with this particular service, I can go to the language.cognitive.azure.com. This is the AI Language Studio. And here's where you can do things like, hey, I want to build a chat bot. I want it to answer questions. I've got custom question answering. I'm going to understand language. And there used to be other tools. So when I first started with this, some of the tools we used to use were Q&A Maker and Lewis, but those are older tools. They've been deprecated and replaced with the newer Azure Cognitive Service for Language, or Azure AI Language. So let's look at this. Let's get into a demo and see what this is made of. And again, I'm a big fan of Learn, Microsoft Learn's website. It's not just documentation, lots of hands-on tutorials, free Azure sandboxes, exam cram prep material. If you haven't checked out learn.microsoft.com, you certainly should. This is one of their quick start tutorials. So if we go and we look at this quick start tutorial, it's going to walk us through in 5 minutes or less how to build your own chatbot in Azure. So the first thing you need to do is provision an Azure language resource. So I'm in the Azure Language Studio and I'm choosing, hey, I want to go provision this resource. So you have to have a subscription. I'm using the Azure for Students subscription, which is a free subscription available to anyone with a .edu email address. I'm saying, hey, I want to go create a language. I got to go log in to one of my accounts. I got many. And I'm going to go provision the language service. So I'm just saying create a new language service. You can see there, it's got all sorts of capabilities. It can analyze sentiment. So, hey, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? It can understand entities or words. So it can understand if I'm saying to delete an email or create an email. So I'll go ahead, and there's even a free tier. I don't know if you saw that, but it popped up real quick. If you want, you can say, hey, I want to use the free 5,000 transactions per month. So it really, again, Microsoft has gone really a long way to try to make this available to everyone with either no cost or very low cost. So I'm stepping through the rest of the little wizard here to go provision this service, kind of accepting all the defaults, trying to keep it as low cost as possible. You can you can configure it with like redundancy and things like that, and then it'll be more money. But this way, it's a low cost. It doesn't use a lot of credits. Doesn't cost me a lot of money. All right, so this guy's running. This does take a minute, so we'll just, oh, no, okay, there it is. It validated all my entries, made sure I put everything in correctly. Now it's doing the actual deployment. Now the deployment does take a minute, so I will fast forward through some of this deployment. You can see there there it is. It created it, and there's a few other resources that get created to support that. So we'll just fast forward all of this so we can, there we go. So it's been deployed. I can put it in an Azure dashboard. That's just a way of grouping my different resources. Because Azure, you can create so many different resources. Sometimes it's helpful to group them in a dashboard to make them easily available. So I'll just call it my AI stuff and then put it on that dashboard. And then from there, I can go to that resource group, which is a group of all the resources that support this. You can see there's a bunch of different things. There's a key vault, there's application insight, there's a log analytic workspace, along with the Azure AI language service itself. So once I've got all that, I can go ahead and select it. I've deployed it, and then test it. Or no, I need to actually submit a schema to it, right? So the language is there, but I haven't taught it anything about my particular domain problem. So in this quick start, they gave me a project sample file that describes email language. So all the entities, all the nouns that are associated with working with email. So things like delete and create and search and things like that. So it's represented in JSON format, JavaScript object notation. And what you can do then is you can go through and you can make your own changes, add your own customizations, whatever is important. So in this particular one, they had verbs for, like I mentioned, create and delete. And if I went and go once I'm done with it, I can go and then test the deployment. So here I am testing the deployment. So I've said, hey, go ahead and choose that deployment, which was the one I just did, and I entered my own text. So the idea is that this is a test of the deployment, and then I can go off and write a web app that makes those REST calls that then utilizes this in a web app. So just for test purposes, I said, I know that garbage was not one of the verbs in my initial schema that I submitted, but noticed it recognized that word garbage using machine learning and said, hey, I've got with 91% confidence that you meant delete that email. So um, I feel pretty good that this can now understand other terms. If someone was asking a question or trying to work with email and they said garbage that email, I know they meant to delete that email. And when I tested this, I tried a couple of different things. Obviously, it recognized words like delete. I think I tried blow up that email and it didn't quite get that. So, but it takes time. It learns. The more and more you work with it, the better it gets at understanding what your intent is with different words. So I mentioned Microsoft Learn, great resource for this kind of thing. I just showed you in about 5 minutes how you could create a service, a chatbot service that's available to be called from any web app. Let's now look at a different one. This one is using the Python Enterprise Chat sample that's available from Microsoft Learn that uses RAG, which allows us, that's the Retrieval Augmented Generation, that allows us to say, hey, here's our documents. And this particular example uses PDFs. So I can say, here's all the PDFs that have to deal with HR. It might be a list of holidays, information about my medical benefits, all that good stuff. And then people can ask questions of it, like, what holidays do I get, or what's HSA, this really feels like the ChatGPT chat box, but the difference is now it's focused just on my data. So they give you a lot of great resources with this. If I actually go to this link, I'll show you some of the details on those resources. Bring this over here. Uh, they kind of explain the architecture behind this. There's the app. There's a web app where people are going to interact with your service. There's behind the scenes an app server and orchestrator that takes the queries, the prompts, and then processes them. And then finally, once it figures out what you're asking using Azure OpenAI, it uses the AI search to search the data sources and return proper answers. What is it going to take to do this? There is a cost. So previously, the language resource I did, we ran on the free tier, so it really wasn't no cost. This one does require Azure resources that are not free. So you either got to break out your wallet, or I like to use my $150 I get every month in Azure credit using my MSDN subscription. Or if you're a student can sign up and you can get $100 for over 12 months to play around with things. In my testing, this particular example, if you deploy it with all the defaults, it costs around $8 to $9 US a month to run. So, and unfortunately, there's no way to pause it. So you pretty much deploy it and it runs and costs you around $8 or $9 a day. And then you have to tear it down to stop the cost. And then you have to redeploy to start it up again. So some services in Azure, you can actually pause and it doesn't cost as much, but this one is not quite that same. So you really have to be careful when you're playing around to deploy it, use it for a little while, then undeploy it, basically tear it down, and then redeploy it when you're trying. But as you'll see, the deployment of these services is not that difficult. It's actually pretty straightforward, as we'll show you in the demo here. So there are some prerequisites, and this particular tutorial walks you through two different versions. You can use what's called code spaces, which is basically VS Code in the cloud backed by Docker, or you can actually do it on your local machine using VS Code. So they recommend that we do the code spaces because it's easier. It's easier to install all the dependencies and without any errors, because sometimes if you're working with your own local machine, you never know what kind of conflicts you might run into. I teach a class. In fact, I just finished up one of my classes at University of Maryland, and a lot of folks ran into issues just because they didn't have the right version of Node.js, or there's a lot of variables when you're working with individual machines. Using CodeSpace, we have more control because it's cloud-based in a Docker. We can standardize the requirements. So that's why it's recommended. So that's what I did. I went and I signed up for an Azure subscription, my student subscription, made sure I was owner. And then this is a very important step. This step here says, hey, you have to apply for access. So you can't just do this willy-nilly. In fact, I've got my demo where I show the first time I do it, I'll show you what kind of error you get if you forget to apply for access. So what this does is it just tells Microsoft, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is part of that transparency to make sure that we're using AI responsibly and using it for good, not for evil, if you will. So this is the request to access the service. You have to kind of give it all your information, how many subscriptions you want to access the AI service, name of the company, where you're coming from, website, phone number, pretty much all your information, what you're trying to do with it, what services you want to access. And then it takes about 24 hours. So you fill this out, and I've done this 4 or 5 times now for different subscriptions, and they get back to me usually Microsoft gets back to me usually within 24 hours. And every time so far I've been approved. I haven't run into any issues where it said, no, you can't do this. But that is a step that's important. If you forget to do that, you will run into an error when you do the deployment. So assuming you get all those prerequisites squared away, the actual deployment is not that difficult. There's a project in GitHub that you can open, and they actually give you a link right here to open up that project. And I believe I already have it open. Let me see if I can bring it up here. And then what that does, if I can bring it up here. So this is the GitHub repo that stores that data. If you scroll down here to the README, it kind of reiterates what the article was saying is, hey, this is what you need. This is what it's going to look like. These are some of the features. This is what the end result should look like, the web app. Some of the important requirements, how much it's going to cost, how to set it up. So everything that we need there. And then once you go to the actual code space, let's see, I have it up already. Am I logged in? I think I am. I don't need to create a new one. I've got one. Where is it here? Here we go. So here's my code space. They give you always, whenever you create one, it gives you a cool name like Vigilant Succotash. But the code space, so it's a Docker in my browser with Visual Studio VS Code and all the code from the repo cloned into my particular workspace. So it really does a great job of doing a ton of work for you and getting you, as a lot of folks at Microsoft like to say, the minimum path to awesome, right? So I didn't have to do a ton of work to provision this. And your first I believe it's 2 code spaces are free to get this up and running. So once this code space is provisioned and ready to go, you can start just like if I was using VS Code locally, I can go in my browser. This is the Explorer for VS Code. This is the app service document. Let me close that for a second. Close that README. So this is just a VS Code, but inside my browser. So I can go and I can see some of the code at the app front end. So there should be an index.html. This is our web page, right? This is what the front, this is some of the text that's going to be on the front of the web page. And then of course, all the code to interact with, to make the calls back to the back end. In the back end, there's the code for the app that actually configures everything and makes the calls to. And again, you don't really need to make any modifications to any of this. As an end user, as a power user, you can come in here and say, I've deployed all this. The only thing I'm really concerned with, I mean, if you want to make changes to the code, but if I'm just trying to use my own data, is to go to where the data directory is. And under the examples, these are the PDFs that this particular app is going to base its answers on. So there's an analysis report, there's benefit options, employee handbook. So all these PDFs are what the chat bot is grounding its answers in. It uses this to answer the questions, and you can replace these with your own data, and that's what we did. So once you're happy with all that, let me actually bring up my Do I have my demo handy? Um, you run the app or the instruction to deploy this. Well, first you have to authenticate, and if I go back to the tutorial, it shows us, it walks us through those steps. So let's see here. Here's our tutorial. Um, I'll walk through the different steps here. So again, we've seen the architectural overview. It goes into, I've got some slides that go into a little more detail about what's going on as far as the question, how it gets cut, how the document gets broken up into what's called tokens, which are kind of like syllables. Each word has multiple syllables that sort of align with something called a token. So those tokens get split up and then they get searched, and you can actually determine how you want them to be searched, either by keywords, which is a more exact search, or by vector, which is more semantic, more meaningful. And then you can even use hybrid. And then that large language model of ChatGPT is used to answer the questions based on the documents. So we already walked through some of the code, but again, here's some of the front end code that actually gets used to ask the questions. This is in Python. They also have a JavaScript version. So if you're, for some reason, you're not a big Python fan, but you'd rather do this in JavaScript, there is a JavaScript version of this. Here's some of the responding to those on the web app, the back end, answering those questions, authenticating. The more back end, you can see it's retrieving from the OpenAI in Azure. And this is how it all, again, kind of how it all works together. The loads, so there's a script when you deploy it that actually uploads the PDFs, breaks it into tokens, and goes through Azure OpenAI and stores it in the search index. The search index, by the way, this particular service is the most expensive. There's several services that support all of this. The search index is the most expensive one. That's the one you can't just pause. It's either there or it's not. And that's like, if it's $8 or $9 a month, the search index is $7 or $8 of that. So it really is the big part. So I mentioned you go to code spaces to get this thing started. And then the first command you'll do, the first command you'll do is authenticate. And then after that, you'll say, hey, I'm going to upload all this in Azure. And that's what this does. It goes through, walks through a little wizard here and says, hey, what are you calling this? What location, what data center in Azure do I want to store this in? So I usually choose, one that's close to me. I'm over here on the East Coast of the US. Then it'll go through, if everything's copacetic, and provision the different Azure services that support this. So things like the app service plan, the form recognizer, the storage account that's going to store the PDF documents, Azure OpenAI, the search service, the app service. So all those services, it's like 7 or 8 services that have to be deployed. The next step is it goes through the documents and it actually looks at each PDF. So there's the benefit details document, and it breaks it up into those tokens and separates it and makes it searchable, both through vector searching and keyword search. And then once all that is complete, this takes some time. So depending on how many documents have, the first time I did it, I had 10 or so documents. It took about 15 to 20 minutes. The second time I did it, I did 400 documents. It took a couple hours. So, depending on the size of your documents, will depend how long it takes to deploy the service. Luckily, once it's deployed, you don't have to redeploy. You can just simply use something like Azure Explorer to go and upload new documents, and the search index will pick it up and parse through it as necessary. So this one, you can see down here, it took 28 minutes and 7 seconds for this particular run to get everything deployed. Once it is successfully deployed, it creates the URL or the web app endpoint, and then you can use that endpoint to actually run the app. And then here's an example of the app where you're chatting with your data. So let me go bring that up and show you guys what that looks like. Oh, let's see, where did I put it? I had everything up and ready to go, and now I've got too many windows. So let's see, I think, I know I put it over here. So it is here. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So I already started asking it questions. I asked it, what does a project manager do? And it said a project manager is responsible for leading the project management team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Notice this one has 2 citations. So it said it found this information in the role library document. It also found it in later in the role library, page 29, kind of using keyword search verbatim. And then also on page 12, using the vector search, meaning it kind of matched, but not exactly. Then what I did is I asked the same question again, and notice down here, it only found it on page 29. And actually, I think I reversed those two. I think page 20, yeah, page 29 was the keyword match in this one. And the reason it has two citations versus one is I went under developer settings. So this particular app has built in a configurability. You can actually go into the configurability and say, what kind of mode do I want to use? Do I want to use vectors or just text? Or why not use both? So what that does is it's going to do the search. These are two different kinds of search. One's keyword search, one is semantic search. And the last one basically combines the results of those searches. So the searches, if you do hybrid search, is going to take a little longer because it's going to do two different kinds and then combine the results to give you, in theory, better results. And then there's all sorts of other parameters that you can choose to see if you're not happy with the search results. And this isn't perfect, as anyone that's familiar with Azure AI, it does have what we like to call hallucinations. So it can make mistakes. The very first time I did this, I asked for like the holiday schedule and based on my data, and it said we don't get President's Day off, even though I knew we did. I told it yes we do. It found that the right information and then corrected itself. So it does learn as it goes from the feedback that the people are putting in. But again, it's grounded in our data. So if I ask it a question like, who won the World Series, in 2020, World, if I can spell World Series in 2019, it's not going to have any idea what I'm talking about, right? ChatGPT would. ChatGPT is grounded in the internet data, but this particular chatbot is grounded in specifically just our data, the data that I give it. So it's not going to be able to answer that question. But if it's going, if I want to ask about what happens in a performance review, that question it can answer based on the data that I gave it. And I used one of the prompts. One of the things about AI that people have been realizing is that we're having a hard time coming up asking good questions. Prompt engineering is this new area that people are working in to say what makes a good question. How do we ask the questions correctly such that we get the responses that we want? And so one way to do that is to provide suggestions of good prompts. And this particular app has a nice way of doing that, with that it kind of says, hey, these are some good questions that you might want to ask. And it even comes up with options to follow up, right? There's actually, I think under developer settings, one of my options is to say, suggest follow-up questions so that it can actually then, so let's see, what's it say? Does my plan cover eye exams? And now, since I set it to follow-up questions, it should recommend a follow-up question. Here we go. Does my plan cover the cost? So prompt engineering is an interesting area where people really are starting to understand that asking good questions is not a common skill. We need to work on that. We need practice. All right. So that was building the app. You can do things like customization. You can change the title. Obviously, it is a web app, a Python web app. You can change the text here. The one that we did, let's see over here. Here's one that we customized. So we put our company name up here. This is actually built on our data, not just the sample data. We're working on things like adding authentication, so not anyone can. Right now, if you just run the app, it's open to anyone. But it is a web app in Azure, so you can go to Azure and add authentication pretty easily. So literally, you just go to the Azure portal. Let me go over here to the Azure portal and go to the particular web app that's associated with the resource group that was deployed as part of this tutorial. So I'll show you that real quick. Basically, and then configure it. So in this case, if I want to configure authentication on that particular web app, I find it. I come in here to my subscription. So remember, when we deployed this, we deployed it to an Azure subscription. So let's look at this one for this. So this particular one is our contracts app. So if I go to that one, I go to AI demo contracts. And then in that subscription, I'm going to have all the resources that support this chat bot. So I'll look at, actually, I should have gone to resources and then filtered on subscriptions. That's what I meant to do. So click on resources, and then I'll filter on just the subscription for the AI demo chatbot. Not that one, this one, the contracts. Let's do that one. You saw right there that other one. So I've got I've got a chatbot and I've got a contracts chatbot, an HR chatbot and a contracts chatbot. And one of them was disabled because I used up all my credits, because this is all just development at the moment. But here we go. So this is the the contracts chatbot. And if I want to go to the app, let's go sort here. I want the app. And then from here, I can say, hey, let's turn on monitoring, logging, if you've done any kind of management of apps in the past, that everything still applies here. So I'll come in here and say, you know what, I like this app, it's great. Maybe I will change the URL, because right now it's just a default ugly URL. So I could add a custom URL. There's a default domain there, but I can add custom ones. And in particular, if I want to add different capabilities, I could come down here and say, you know what, let's add authentication, because I don't want just anyone to log into this. I want there to be an identity provider. So I can go ahead and add an identity provider. So this could be, any of the providers, the major providers out there. Apple has one, Facebook has one, Google has one, Twitter has one. I like Microsoft. I'm a big Microsoft person, so I'm going to use Microsoft's identity provider, and I have to register it. I could just create a new one, give it a name. How do I want it deployed? Basically, all the defaults work, except for, let's see, do I want? Yeah, the issuer tenant. So in this case, I only want folks from my company to have access to it. So I'll use the issuer tenant. I could specify other tenants if I was like working with a partner, but yeah, these all work. Everything looks good. And then, what do I want if they fail? Give them a 302. That stands for access denied. Actually, I want to give them a 403, right? Saying that's access denied. 302 says redirect. I don't know that I need to redirect them. I'm just going to give them a 403. And then I'll go ahead and add that. Now that should added the identity provider. And now if someone tries to access my app, they're going to be prompted to at least log in and authenticate. I didn't do authorization. I just did authentication to identify them, make sure they're from my company. Another step would be to add authorization and say, hey, only certain people are allowed to then access this, different kinds of data. So it's really a two-step process if you want to complete the security circuit there. Authentication, identify who's accessing it. Authorization, grant them certain roles within the application. All right. What else? We did that. Very good. Real quick, we got a few minutes. Chatbot and Teams. If you're a big Microsoft Teams user and you want a similar chatbot feature, we used to be called Power Virtual Agents. Microsoft has changed it, and now it's called Microsoft Copilot Studio. Hi, Microsoft. Why must you rename things? That's okay. There's a great little demo here where we go out and can create a studio, Microsoft Copilot Studio. They call it a Copilot, but it's a chatbot. It uses Power Virtual Agents. It's available in Teams, even though it's now part of Microsoft Copilot Studio. I do think Microsoft is doing their darndest just to call everything Copilot to try to get it all under one umbrella. It's a little confusing, but I think, I keep saying to myself, this is, and actually it looks like you don't have to do it in Teams. You can also do a standalone web app, but I've been doing it in Teams just because it makes it easier to deploy and easier to access. So this is me walking through the different steps, how to create a bot using Teams, and then we'll just kind of fast forward a little bit here. We'll go in, we'll say, hey, we're going to go create that. So we went to Teams, went to the Copilot Studio, which is Power Virtual Agents, and we said, hey, let's create a new Copilot. We'll call it, I just called it, I think this is the weather demo. What's the weather demo? So in this particular example, the bot is just going to be asked about weather. You're going to notice that it's similar in that we have to provision a service, and we have to train that service on the question, on the domain that we want people to ask questions about. If you want, if there's a website that has information about the, like weatherchannel.com, you can say, hey, use this to help me populate that knowledge base. So that's what I'm doing there. I said, hey, look at the Weather Channel. That can be, people might ask about different questions in the Weather Channel's information. So you got a nice little visual there. We're building up my Copilot. I'll fast forward through some of that. And then the next thing is to create topics. So using Copilot Studio, you give it topics. In this case, it's the weather topic. And I can say, right now I asked, is it cold today? And it says, I don't know how to help you with that. So I need to train it. I need for it to understand what it means when I say cold. It's got some default stuff. It knows how to say hello and goodbye. It knows things like, what are your hours? But so I need some better trigger phrases, right? Those are some of the built-in trigger phrases. This is like built for like a store, some phrases about weather. So what I'll do is I'll say, hey, let's add some more some more topics and triggers and teach it about what some of the people might ask when they're asking about weather. So I go in here to topics. I'm going to create a new one. And interesting, one of the options was to use Copilot to help me build a Copilot. So you can actually use AI to help you build AI. But I chose to do it manually. So I came in here and said, hey, I've got some phrases that's based on this new topic that'll trigger this topic to take effect. So what are some of the phrases that people ask about? Is if they're asking about weather, is it cold out? Is it raining? And you got to give it. I think what do they say here? They recommend around 5 to 10 trigger phrases. That's enough. That's enough for the AI to start understanding some of the entities and kind of what you're getting at. What else did I add there? Is it warm out? What's the weather? Those kind of phrases. So as I train it with some of these different phrases, then the next thing to say is, hey, based on those phrases, how do I respond? So the next response, oops, it looks like I jumped ahead there, is to say, all right, once maybe I need more information. Once I realize that once my bot realizes they're asking about weather, they might want to know, where are you? So I'll ask a question, where are you located? And then based on that, I'll get some more information, like their zip code or East Coast, West Coast, and then I can respond a little more, with more knowledge. In this case, I just hard coded an answer. Hey, if it's on the East Coast, it's cold and wet, which it is where I'm at now. Or if you're on the West Coast, it's warm and sunny. So in the real world, I would probably tie this to weather.com, call an API with the zip code or something like that. But you get the idea. It's a way for us to have a chatbot to initially understand some of the questions and then start discussing the topic. Once this is all done, it feels very much like a workflow. Again, no code, low code. I simply deploy it, and then I can start testing it right there in the test harness. And then I can deploy this as an app to any of my team channels, and people can talk to it in a Teams just like they would another person. So you can see the example there. I'm asking, hey, is it warm out, and where are you located, East Coast? And it responds. And it even goes through the little workflow a little bit by bit to kind of, you can see its thought process through the topic that I trained it on. So it's a pretty cool, easy citizen developer way of building a chatbot using Copilot Studio. All right, wrapping up here. We just got a couple of minutes. There's lots more information out there. I know I saw a lot of great questions. I don't know if I've answered all of them or even some of them, but check out this link. There's all embedded in my slides, which I'll make available. There's the AI immersion workshop that walks you through. This is just lab 4 that focuses on language, but there's other labs that do other areas of the Azure AI. Microsoft has this 30 days to learn it challenge where you go and you take some of the Microsoft Learn courses, and if you complete it in 30 days, you get access to 50% off a certification exam. So Microsoft, again, is truly trying to make it easy for people to spin up on knowledge of AI and actually get certified in it. There's a whole course on GitHub, Generative AI for Beginners, 12 lessons, so that it's like a college course where each lesson you take a few hours to get through it, understand it, and then you move on to the next one. And just tons of more resources. There's free data science books, Zero to Hero, GitHub samples, cloud guides, more information for those folks using Power Automate, more information about vector search and semantic ranking and full text search versus vector search. It really the amount of information that Microsoft is putting out there for free to get us up to speed on AI is pretty amazing. So hopefully, um, this has helped you a little bit. So real quick, I got a few questions in there. Oh, for students, go here, sign up, get free credits. Um, yes, you can, if you're a student, you can get, free $100 credit, no credit card required, access to a bunch of free resources. You can sign up for that cloud challenge and do the cloud challenge, get 50% off an exam. Um, it really they do a ton of good work or give out free resources to help those in the academic field get access to all this stuff. So thanks everyone. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you got some nuggets out of that and go off and build some cool AI bots.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. So we really enjoyed the session and that Q&A session as well. That too, you have created the Copilots in the Copilot Studio, and you will show me the all the insights how to integrate this chat GPT by using this Azure AI and everything. So even though I'm a AI MVP, so even though I'm also do the same thing while I'm doing the demonstrate to the tech enthusiast. So I really appreciate that one, and thank you so much your valuable insights and all. So I would like to looking forward to the more events in the future as well. Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, David. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah.